Carl Jung's final caution to empaths was chilling. They are consuming your essence, and the majority of you are unaware it's even happening. In his personal journals, Jung detailed a psychological dynamic so unsettling that he was reluctant to make it public. He saw that empaths, individuals with profound emotional sensitivity, were being methodically depleted by what I term subconscious energy predators. These were not overt aggressors. They often presented as charismatic, wounded individuals who appeared to desperately require healing. However, Jung unearthed a disturbing fact. They had subconsciously learned to sustain themselves by drawing on the spiritual vitality of others, especially empaths whose inner radiance was most potent. The most alarming aspect is that the draining process is imperceptible. It unfolds through emotional manipulation, masked as intimacy, through trauma-based attachments mistaken for genuine love, and through the empath's own compassionate disposition being used as a weapon against them. Jung grasped that empaths weren't just encountering difficult personalities by chance. They were being deliberately targeted by those whose own inner light had gone out and who could only persist by consuming the light from others. Come with me as we journey into the shadow territory of human psychology to unmask these unseen predators. Understand how to spot their draining techniques before they take hold and uncover Jung's suppressed method for shifting from victim to sovereign without forfeiting the very gift that defines you. Because this is what Jung found that mainstream psychology is still unwilling to admit. Empaths are not created flawed. They are molded in the crucible of childhood trauma to be the ideal hosts for emotional predators. Jung noted, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But his clinical practice revealed a bleaker reality. When an empath encounters an energy predator, only a single individual is changed, and it is consistently the empath. Consider this from a developmental standpoint. Empaths cultivate their heightened sensitivity as a survival tool. The child who could decode every fleeting expression, predict every emotional shift, and absorb every unspoken feeling was the one who endured tumultuous home environments. Yet, herein lies the cruel paradox. The very survival tool that protected you in childhood now transforms you into a magnet for adult predators who have learned to use your gift against you. Research by Dr. Judith Orloff corroborates Jung's observations. An empath's mirror neurons are more active than those of an average person. Your brain literally takes in the emotions of others as if they belonged to you. But what Jung saw, and what many therapists overlook, is that certain individuals have learned to manipulate this neurological distinction. They don't just happen to activate your empathy. They do it strategically. They have subconsciously perfected the craft of emotional manipulation that feels like genuine connection. This includes trauma bonding that poses as deep love and an energetic siphoning that you interpret as closeness. But that isn't the most shattering element. If you've ever felt utterly exhausted after spending time with certain individuals but couldn't articulate why, write this in the comments. They were consuming my essence. The most shattering element is what Jung identified as the shadow projection reversal. The energy predator doesn't simply take your light. They persuade you that your purpose is to give it away. Jung witnessed this dynamic repeatedly in his work. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But for empaths and energy predators, this dynamic is flipped. The predator casts their own void onto the empath, convincing them that feeling exhausted is natural, that burnout is a form of love, and that depletion signifies devotion. Recall the last instance you felt utterly spent after being with someone. Your body likely sent you distinct signals: abrupt fatigue, emotional flooding, bodily tension, or mental fog. Yet, rather than heeding these alarms, you likely reasoned that you were being overly sensitive or reading too much into things. This is precisely the belief the energy predator needs you to hold. Jung referred to this as what I call the gaslighting of the unconscious, where another person's shadow persuades your conscious mind that your intuition is the actual problem. Here is how the draining process functions. And it is here that Jung's observations become alarmingly precise. Stage 1. The light recognition. Energy predators are subconsciously drawn to the radiance of empaths. They can detect your emotional generosity from across a room. Jung observed that narcissistic individuals possess a remarkable talent for identifying empaths almost instantly. They spot the glow of a person who gives more than they receive, who feels profoundly, and who shoulders emotional weight for others. Stage 2. The wound display. The predator doesn't start with demands, they start with their pain. They disclose their trauma, their hardships, their intense feelings. They reflect your own depth while concealing their own inner emptiness. Jung stated, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But energy predators have mastered becoming who you need them to be. Stage 3. The empathy activation. After ensnaring your compassion, they commence the methodical extraction. They generate continuous crises that demand your emotional effort. They offload their trauma without offering reciprocity. They make you feel unique for understanding them when no one else could. Jung saw that empaths often confuse being needed with being loved. Stage 4. The depletion normalization. This is the most treacherous stage. The predator persuades you that feeling drained is evidence of your profound connection. They equate exhaustion with love and frame your emotional overload as a sign of being a highly sensitive person, rather than someone being systematically drained. But this is where Jung's insight becomes groundbreaking. He didn't view this merely as a dysfunctional interpersonal dynamic. He identified it as an archetypal pattern, what I term the wounded healer meeting the shadow devourer. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For an empath, this involves accepting that your compassion can be turned against you, that your gift can become a cage, and that your light can be drained if you don't learn how to safeguard it." In Jungian thought, every archetype contains a shadow. The empath's shadow is not malice. It is the subconscious drive to be needed, the dependency on fixing others because being useful feels more secure than being truly seen. It's a fear of abandonment so profound that you would rather endure emotional vampirism than face the risk of being alone. Energy predators are not malevolent individuals consciously orchestrating your downfall. They are unconscious entities propelled by what Jung termed the shadow's hunger for wholeness. They sense in you the qualities they have banished in themselves, the capacity for true feeling, authentic connection, and emotional substance. But rather than undertaking the internal work to recover these attributes, they have learned to siphon them from others. They feed on your emotional energy because they are disconnected from their own. They stand in your radiance because they have snuffed out their internal flame. This results in what I call the psychological vampire effect. The more energy you give, the more they crave. The more you attempt to heal them, the more broken they appear. The more light you offer, the larger their shadow looms. This isn't because they are fundamentally wicked, it's because they are psychologically fractured. They have renounced their own capacity for genuine emotion and must therefore perpetually source it externally, like someone with no digestive system who must eat constantly. You cannot heal another by allowing them to feast on your very being. You cannot love someone back to completeness by letting them extinguish your light. You cannot save someone who is subconsciously determined to remain lost. Allow me to illustrate how this pattern manifests in various contexts. The romantic energy vampire. Sarah encountered David at a spiritual workshop. He appeared profound, sensitive, and hurt in a manner that appealed to her healing instincts. He recounted his childhood trauma, his battles with depression, his quest for purpose. Sarah felt singled out, special for being the one who genuinely understood him. Yet, within a few months, Sarah realized she was constantly exhausted. After their talks, David would phone her during work hours with emotional emergencies. He would unload his trauma for hours, never inquiring about her day. If she tried to discuss her own problems, he would either dismiss them or pivot the conversation back to his own pain. Applying Jung's ideas, Sarah understood David wasn't looking for healing. He was looking for a supply. Her empathy had become his addiction, her emotional support, his lifeline. When she started to establish boundaries, David's facade cracked. He accused her of being detached, unfeeling, not the person he believed she was. The reality: Sarah was no longer his emotional resource. Consequently, David's subconscious started to seek a new host, the family energy parasite. Michael's mother had always been emotionally volatile. She would phone him with an endless series of crises, making him feel accountable for her happiness. If he failed to answer his phone promptly, she would guilt-trip him for deserting her. She would use threats of self-harm when he attempted to create distance. Jung would have identified this as the devouring mother archetype, the parent who unconsciously consumes their child's vitality instead of fostering it. Michael's empathy had been used against him since he was a child. When Michael understood the concept of energy parasitism, he saw that his exhaustion wasn't due to being a poor son. It was from being methodically drained by someone who never learned to manage her own emotional state. Establishing boundaries with his mother felt like a betrayal, but it was, in fact, an act of self-preservation. The workplace emotional vampire. Lisa worked alongside a colleague who was perpetually in a state of crisis. This individual would dominate team meetings with personal issues, corner Lisa for extended emotional support sessions, and turn their personal dysfunction into everyone else's problem. What made this especially insidious was that this colleague presented their behavior as sensitivity and emotional depth. They cast themselves as the feeling individual in a heartless corporate world. Lisa's innate empathy made her feel duty-bound to offer ceaseless emotional support. Jung would have recognized this as projection. The colleague was subconsciously making their emotional instability everyone else's burden while portraying themselves as a victim of an unfeeling system. But here is where Jung's warning becomes critical. The longer you permit energy parasites to draw from your light, the more you start to blend with their shadow. You begin to accept their projection that your purpose is to cater to the emotional needs of others. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For empaths, this involves acknowledging that your drive to heal others frequently stems from your own unaddressed wounds. The shadow aspect of empathy is the subconscious notion that your existence lacks value unless you are useful, that love is something to be earned through servitude, that your worth is tied to your capacity to absorb and manage the pain of others. This set of beliefs makes you an ideal host for energy parasites. You offer endless emotional support while persuading yourself it is an act of love. You drain your own vitality while labeling it compassion. You forsake your own well-being under the guise of spiritual development. But Jung uncovered something that will permanently alter your self-perception. Your light is not intended for others to consume. It is meant to light up your own journey toward wholeness. When you persistently give your energy away, you are not being loving. You are evading the formidable task of learning to love yourself. When you fixate on healing others, you are often escaping the daunting work of mending your own injuries. The energy parasite becomes your accomplice in spiritual evasion. They present someone for you to rescue so you can avoid rescuing yourself. They create constant drama so you don't have to confront your own shadows. They give you the role of the martyr so you do not have to step into the role of the sovereign. Here is Jung's framework for safeguarding your light without hardening your heart. I refer to it as the light method. L is for learn to identify energetic imprints. Jung stressed the importance of what he called feeling-toned complexes. Every person emits an energetic imprint that your empathic abilities can read if you know what to notice. Energy parasites register differently in your system compared to healthy individuals. With parasites, you feel depleted, uneasy, muddled, or emotionally hijacked after interacting. With healthy people, you feel revitalized, clear, serene, or inspired. Begin keeping a record of how you feel before, during, and after interactions with various people. Your body is a highly attuned detection system that can spot energy parasites if you learn to heed its signals. I is for integrate your shadow. Jung held that shadow integration was vital for psychological well-being. For empaths, this involves acknowledging the parts of you that crave being needed, that dread abandonment, and that believe love must be earned through service. Ask yourself, what benefit do I derive from being needed by broken people? How does saving others help me sidestep my own healing? What childhood injury am I attempting to resolve through others? The aim is not to eradicate these inclinations, but to bring them into awareness so they no longer steer your relationship choices subconsciously. G is for guard your sacred energy. Jung wrote, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens. Protecting your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is a spiritual duty. This involves declining emotional labor that drains you. It involves refusing to bear the weight of other people's unprocessed emotions. It involves selecting relationships that sustain rather than deplete you. Your energy is limited and precious. Each moment spent processing someone else's shadow is a moment lost for cultivating your own light. H is for honor your authentic nature. Energy parasites are drawn to empaths who diminish their light to make others feel at ease. The more you conceal your gifts, doubt your intuition, or downplay your sensitivity, the more you become a mark for those looking to consume what you are holding back. Jung believed in what he termed individuation, the process of becoming your true self rather than who others want you to be. For empaths, this means claiming your sensitivity as a strength, trusting your intuition as wisdom, and using your gifts with consciousness rather than by default. T is for transform trauma into wisdom. Jung stated, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This involves accepting that you've been targeted by energy parasites, not due to weakness, but because you possess something valuable that unconscious individuals wish to consume. They will attempt to guilt you back into the draining dynamic by highlighting their pain, their trauma, and their need for your help." Jung called this what I term the extinction burst of the shadow. When parasites can no longer feed with ease, their desperation and manipulation escalate. This is a clear indicator that your boundaries are effective, though it feels like proof that you are being cruel. Remain steadfast during this period. Recognize that their escalation stems from their addiction to your energy, not from your worth as a human being. You are not accountable for managing their emotions once they can no longer use you as an emotional outlet. The healthy individuals in your life will honor your boundaries and may even praise your growth. They will understand your need for space, champion your healing process, and reciprocate the emotional energy you put into the relationship. But here is the most crucial point. You must become the type of person you wish to attract. If you desire conscious relationships, you must cultivate consciousness within yourself. If you seek reciprocal bonds, you must learn to receive as adeptly as you give. If you long for authentic love, you must present your authentic self rather than playing a role designed for others. Jung understood that this struggle for your light is, at its core, a spiritual one. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." However, energy parasites have a clear stake in keeping you diminished, depleted, and unaware of your genuine power. When you start to shield your energy and establish boundaries, you are not merely altering relationship patterns. You are participating in what I call the war for your soul. This is not a metaphor. Your essence, your light, your life force is what is at stake. Energy parasites will deploy every tool at their disposal to preserve their access to your light. Guilt. After all I've confided in you, you're just going to leave me? Shame. I believed you were a more compassionate person. Fear. You're acting selfishly and will die alone. False urgency. I need you now more than I ever have. Identity attacks. This isn't the real you. Yet, Jung provided the ultimate defense against these methods: consciousness. When you can recognize the manipulation for what it truly is, it loses its hold over you. The fact is, each time you refuse energy vampirism, you are affirming your own evolution. Every boundary you enforce is a declaration for your true self. Each time you decline to dim your light for another's comfort, you are choosing spiritual advancement over spiritual inertia. This does not mean you become cold or unfeeling. It means you become discerning. You learn to distinguish between authentic compassion and codependent enabling. You find out how to support others without harming yourself. But here is what Jung discovered that changes everything. When an empath awakens to their true strength, they become a threat to systems founded on unconsciousness. An empath who can no longer be manipulated, drained, or controlled jeopardizes every relationship dynamic founded on imbalance. You become a mirror reflecting others' unconsciousness back at them. You become a boundary that compels others to assume responsibility for their own emotional regulation. The awakened empath doesn't merely shield their own light, they become a beacon, showing others the way to ignite their own inner flame. You transition from being a resource for consumption to a catalyst for others' development. But this change demands something that alarms most empaths. You must be prepared to be disliked by unconscious individuals. You must be ready to let go of relationships founded on your depletion. You must be willing to stand on your own rather than compromise yourself for a false sense of connection. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." As an awakened empath, you can only sustain relationships with individuals who are also dedicated to their own growth. All others will naturally drift away. This is not a failure. It is discernment. This is not a loss. It is liberation. This is not loneliness. It is sovereignty. Comment below if you've been labeled selfish for establishing boundaries with energy vampires. My energy is sacred. You will learn that you prefer one genuine connection over a dozen draining ones. You will see that the quality of presence is more important than the number of people. You will grasp that your light is too precious to be consumed by those unwilling to do their own inner work. There are 3 stages of empath development that Jung outlined, and knowing your current stage can help you advance toward genuine energetic sovereignty. Level 1. The unconscious empath. You feel everything but comprehend nothing. You soak up others' emotions without knowing it. You are perpetually drained but hold yourself responsible for being overly sensitive. You attract energy parasites because you have not learned to shield your gifts. At this stage, your empathy directs you, not the other way around. You are like a radio receiving every frequency without the ability to select a specific station. The remedy is to cultivate emotional boundaries and learn to differentiate your own feelings from those of others. Level 2. The conscious empath. You acknowledge your empathic traits and start to employ them deliberately. You can perceive others' emotions without automatically absorbing them. You have learned fundamental energy protection skills and can uphold some boundaries with energy parasites. At this stage, you are starting to grasp the distinction between empathy and codependency. You can offer compassion without depleting yourself, but you still grapple with guilt when setting boundaries and occasionally revert to old habits. Level 3. The sovereign empath. You have integrated your shadow and claimed your empathic gifts as spiritual tools rather than emotional liabilities. You can feel profoundly without losing your sense of self. You attract conscious individuals who reciprocate your emotional investment. At this stage, your empathy transforms into an instrument of discernment instead of a trap for manipulation. You can distinguish others' authentic emotions from their performed ones. You can offer a healing presence without shouldering others' burdens as your own. The path from level 1 to level 3 demands what I call the courage to disappoint. You must be willing to disappoint the energy parasites who desire unfettered access to your light. You must be willing to disappoint family members who have become accustomed to using you as their emotional stabilizer. You must be willing to disappoint the societal expectation that empaths should be perpetually available for the healing of others. But I must share Jung's final caution regarding this transformation. Once you start to shield your light, you cannot revert to unconscious empathy. Once you perceive the draining patterns, you cannot unsee them. Once you experience energetic sovereignty, you cannot return to emotional servitude. This awareness will cost you relationships. It will question your sense of self. It will compel you to face the parts of yourself that prefer being needed over being respected, being useful over being authentic, and being depleted over being alone. Some of you might use this knowledge to construct walls rather than boundaries. You might grow cynical about human connection instead of discerning about energetic exchange. You might mistake emotional unavailability for spiritual fortitude. Do not fall into this trap. The objective is not to cease feeling or caring. The objective is to feel and care with consciousness, with purpose and wisdom, rather than with compulsion and unawareness. Jung's ultimate warning was this: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But achieving your true self demands that you release the person you believe you should be for the sake of others' comfort. Your light is not a commodity to be consumed. It is a presence to be embodied. Your empathy is not a service to be rendered. It is a gift to be shared with intention. The world does not require more exhausted healers. It requires awakened empaths who understand the difference between love and enabling, compassion and codependency, and service and self-destruction. If people began treating you differently once you ceased to be their emotional outlet, comment, "They sensed my awakening before I announced it." Recall Jung's chilling discovery about empaths being preyed upon. The energy parasites he described were not monsters. They were unconscious individuals who had learned to survive by taking the light of others instead of stoking their own inner fire. Jung wrote in his last journals, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. You cannot solve the issue of energy parasites by attempting to fix them. You can only outgrow your own need to be needed by them." But here is what Jung understood that changes the entire picture. When you protect your light, you do not diminish it, you magnify it. When you prevent others from feeding on your energy, you have more energy for your own growth, your own healing, and your own evolution. The empath who learns to protect their gifts does not become less compassionate. They become more discerning. They learn to offer their light to those who can receive it without draining it, appreciate it without consuming it, and match it without dimming it. Jung's final warning was not solely about shielding yourself from energy parasites. It was about claiming your inherent right as a conscious individual who decides how to use their gifts rather than being subconsciously compelled to give them away. Your sensitivity is not a flaw to be controlled. It is a superpower to be mastered. Your empathy is not a vulnerability to be concealed. It is a strength to be wielded with awareness. Your light is not fuel for another's darkness. It is the illumination for your own journey toward wholeness. The energy parasites Jung cautioned against can only prey on unconscious empaths. When you awaken to your true self, when you learn to protect your essence while sharing your gifts, when you achieve sovereignty over your own energetic field, you become impervious to their draining mechanisms. That is the ultimate shield. Not barriers that exclude everyone, but a consciousness that admits only love. Master this difference, and you will never again mistake being drained for being loved, being needed for being valued, or being depleted for being devoted. Jung's warning was stark. They are feeding on your light, but his promise was even more powerful. You have the power to stop them. If you see yourself in this warning, you are not by yourself. Thousands of empaths are awakening to these dynamics and reclaiming their strength. Share in the comments one boundary you are prepared to set to protect your light. Your experience could be precisely what another empath needs to hear to start their own journey toward energetic sovereignty. If you are ready to explore Jung's psychology more deeply and its application to modern relationships, view my video on why you have no motivation left after facing your shadow, where I explain what happens to your drive and ambition when you start the shadow integration process. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.